Basically, there was an internal threat and an external threat. The internal threat was unionism, and the external threat was censorship. Boa noite, amigos brasileiros. Bem-vindos de volta ao Oscars Outsider, the podcast about the awards race in Hollywood history. I'm Dylan Ferguson. I'm your host, and with me, as always, is Craig Midwinter.
Hey.
Craig, bem-vindos.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. And we have, once again, our beloved special guest, Sean O'Rourke. Hey, Sean, how's it going?
Good. Boa noite.
Yeah, that's the spirit.
Yeah.
So we
I do at the top have to give you a quick mea culpa. The last time we spoke, I had some bad things to say about Ben-Hur, and it was on Criterion, and I watched it recently, and I just want to admit that I was wrong. It does kick ass.
Yes, there we go. That's what I was saying. There's like the homoerotic subtext. You don't necessarily get that when you watch it as a kid or over Easter with your parents.
Exactly.
But there's some stuff there. There's a lot of fun stuff. Great. Apologies to the estate of William Wyler. We are a little bit later in the show going to be talking about the movie of the millennium, The Secret Agent. Everybody's favorite Brazilian masterpiece, or is it? We'll debate that later. But our main feature today is going to be going all the way back to where it all began. We are going to be talking about the first ever Academy Awards held in 1929, almost 100 years ago. I can say I think I'm more excited to do this episode than I have been about any other episode in the long and storied history of Oscars Outsider. Really happy to talk about some really cool silent films that came in right at the end of the silent film period when they held the very first ever Academy Awards. But first, we like to always quickly resume what's been going on in the awards race in the week since we last recorded an episode. We're recording on Monday, the 23rd of February right now. We do have new results. Last night, there was the BAFTAs, the British Academy of Film and Television Awards. That's probably what it stands for. The British Oscars, the BAFTAs. That's probably what they say over there, those weirdos. One battle after another won Best Film. Craig, did you watch any of the BAFTAs? Did you?
No.
Did you log into BBC iPlayer and tell them you have a TV license? And
I did not watch any of the BAFTAs. Obviously saw what everyone's talking about in clips today, but I did not watch the ceremony.
Any thoughts on the winners? Have you seen who won?
Yeah, I saw who won. I don't think that there was anything that was like too overwhelmingly surprising for me. Maybe in the supporting races, like Sean Penn getting supporting actor, that category seems like it's up in the air. We have not seen anyone repeat in any of the major precursors. So that's fairly interesting. We also saw Wunmi, how do you say her last name? Oh my
Mosaku,
God.
I think.
Mosaku.
Yeah.
Winning for Sinners, which spices that race up a little bit as well. So I think that
though also
kind of
does it because she's British. So I feel like when they give it to a British person, I'm like, yeah, that's just because they're British. I don't feel like it necessarily bears on the Oscars voting.
Yeah. I
mean, they gave Best Actor to Robert Aramayo.
Yeah.
You know him, you love him, you've heard of him. He's Robert Aramayo from the smash hit movie I Swear. So yeah, I don't know, maybe, but I feel like that's just like the token British person award. Though I did also think they were going to give Best Film to Hamnet just because of the British connection, but they instead gave Hamnet Best British Film and gave One Battle After Another Best Picture, which for me, I'm like at this point ready to just call it and say, it's One Battle After Another is winning the Oscar, even if it doesn't win the Actors Award, which is what they call the SAG Awards now. I don't think that changes anything in my mind at this point. It has the Directors Guild. It has the BAFTA. It's done. It's getting over the finish line. The telecast garnered some controversy, as you alluded to. So here's what's weird to me about that. So as you may know when you're hearing this, there was a person who has Tourette syndrome, who is a Tourette's activist, who was at the ceremony because of I Swear, is like the movie about a guy with Tourette's that's like inspired by his life or something. He blurted out some slurs, notably when Michael B. Jordan and Delroy Lindo were on stage. The weird thing to me is that the telecast did not censor it. They did, and the tape delay is, by the way, was not like the 8-second tape delay or whatever they use for live
2
events.
hours.
Yeah, for some reason the ceremony started at 5 p.m. London time, and then they started showing it on BBC at 7 p.m. London time, which already is like, so of course everybody knows who's won because it's leaked out by the time that it's airing. How could they not organize that better? I don't know. It's a little weird, but anyways, they had 2 hours to make any edits they wanted to.
Tea time though. You got to fit tea time in there, though.
Well, but it's important to note that they did make other edits to the audio.
That's what I was going for. So I feel like that's kind of the maybe less reported on part of this, is that it has now been confirmed that they cut out the director of My Father's Shadow saying "Free Palestine" during the program. So they managed to not edit out somebody shouting out the N-word, but did edit out somebody saying "Free Palestine." That's crazy.
Yeah.
What the hell is going on at the BBC? That's messed up.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really feels like a skit that Larry David would have cut for being like too obvious that this whole thing went down.
It's like a perfectly engineered Kobayashi Maru for woke.
Yeah, no, I think we could agree that it was poorly handled by the BBC and by the BAFTAs too. Like Delroy Lindo said that like nobody from the ceremony like talked to him afterwards.
Yeah, they didn't address it in the ceremony until like an hour after it happened.
Yeah, weird stuff. In terms of things that might affect, there's another thing that happened after the ceremony. I don't know if you guys saw this, but it got some people talking. Somebody did an interview with Paul Thomas Anderson after the ceremony, and they kind of put him into a corner and asked him about like making political statements as an artist. Did you see this? You know what I'm talking about?
No, I didn't see this.
Because PTA's done a lot of acceptance speeches by this point. He's already won a lot of hardware and has never really said anything political. That's really not his vibe. He doesn't really do that. And somebody, an interviewer, kind of questioned him about that, and he was kind of visibly uneasy, kind of shifting around on his feet during that. And the response he gave was basically, I'm going to try to paraphrase it the best I can from memory, but of course I am paraphrasing. It was something along the lines of, I'm going to fail if I try to do that for you right now. I'm confident that when I express myself in my work. He said, I'm not a politician. I'm a filmmaker. I express myself through my work, basically, which got some people upset. I think a lot of people associated that with a controversy that happened a little bit earlier when Wim Wenders opened the Berlin Film Festival by saying something like, "We are filmmakers. We're not politicians." Which got some people angry because they interpreted it as him kind of shirking his duty as an artist that is involved in the political world, of course. Though I think Wenders' comments were, I think, not good, but like could be like were open to interpretation anyways. The Berlin Film Festival is kind of a whole other story where there was a lot of like political statements that ended up being made maybe as a result of the controversy around the opening statements. But I think a lot of people equated what Wim Wenders did with what Paul Thomas Anderson did, and they took his comments as saying like it's not the artist's job to get political, which is not at all how I interpret what he said. I think what he said is actually fair in the sense that he's like saying, I do have political opinions, but I trust my work to express it because I don't trust myself to say it verbally. That's not like my position. I don't know. What do you guys think about that? I feel like a lot of people have kind of been hoping that PTA would get political now that he's like very visible. He's doing the award circus. He keeps accepting awards and he really has refused to do that. Do you guys think that that's kind of disappointing from him, or do you think that it's not fair to ask him to be political?
I do think that answer is a little bit of a cop-out. Like, it just allows a lot of wiggle room and be like, my political views are up to your interpretation of what my political views are. I think, it feels like a little bit of a cop-out. I'm not entirely surprised. Like you said, he has not really used his platform to say anything politically, and so I'm not terribly surprised. Whether he thinks that it might impact his chances or what the motivation there is, TBD. But yeah, I do think it's a little bit of a cop out. I think there is validity in saying, like, I am not comfortable expressing myself through my words. I feel like I'm able to articulate it better throughout my work, but I don't know. It does feel at the same time like dancing around the question and just like copping out.
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on this, Sean?
I don't know. Kind of in the middle. It's like I think it's bad to look at artists and be like, you should look at me and tell me you're the same kind of communist that I am, or whatever.
Yeah.
But also, like, in the current political climate, you'd think people could say like something of substance. It seems like a time where it's very easy to do that.
So especially for somebody who's made a movie which seems very rhyming with a lot of the horrible things happening in America right now. It does feel a little like, it would feel satisfying to see the guy who made this movie say, like, ICE sucks, or like you could say the same two words that Billie Eilish and Bad Bunny said on the Grammy stage, and you're at least making some kind of a point. Just say ICE out if you want to, but I honestly, I gotta say, I do have respect for what he said, and I feel like a lot of people are willfully misinterpreting it. I am sympathetic to the idea, like, that I've worked my career to try to express the things I want to express through this medium, and I'm at a place where I'm confident using this medium to express myself, and I'm not going to express myself otherwise, because it's like not going to be expressed the way I would like it to. I feel like that's not entirely a cop out. Like, I kind of respect that perspective of being like, it's like, like the painter who says, like, well, I don't want to explain what's happening in my painting because the painting is the painting and that's what I do. I don't write, I paint. It feels kind of like a similar thing. And I kind of get that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
In general, I like an artist doesn't owe me anything, really.
Yeah. Anyways, it's clear by now, if anybody thought that PTA was going to make a political statement on Oscars night, he won't. And I don't know if anybody will. We didn't really see any direct political statements on the Golden Globes beyond like meaningless things like, in times like these, love is stronger than hate, or like, bullshit that means nothing at all. Craig, do you think anybody on Oscars night is going to make a direct political statement, and if so, who?
It's looking less and less likely that it's going to happen, since it's a lot lower stakes to do it at any of these precursors, I think, at least. And we haven't really...
Unless someone's saving their ammo.
Yeah, I mean, maybe, but you would think that we would hear a little bit more. I feel like we're not going to get much. We might get it from, someone that in like the international foreign film category, or like shorts or documentary. We might see something there, but any of the big ones, I'm feeling less and less like hopeful. Unless we see the tide turn, I like have more hope for the winners of Sinners to say something than I do of the winners of One Battle After Another right now, at least. I think what we're going to be like looking to see who is like partying with Kash Patel at the Oscars after parties.
Okay, now that's another question. Who's most likely to party with Kash Patel afterwards? And why is it Chloe Zhao? I don't know.
It would probably be Leo DiCaprio, if we're being honest.
Yeah.
They've definitely hung out. I'm sure Leo DiCaprio and Kailash Patel have hung out, unless Leo is like blocking his number or something.
We could see Josh Safdie in there, maybe.
There are rumors he's a mega guy, but I don't know. This is a rumor show now, apparently. I think if there is somebody who's going to say to go to Oscars night, it will be Kleber Mendonça, the director of The Secret Agent, if The Secret Agent gets the best foreign film. They kind of didn't let him speak on the Golden Globes. I think he would have if they had, because he did win best foreign film on the Golden Globes. But I think the producer, if I remember right, the producers spoke and they started playing the music. I think it was the only guy who got played off too in the whole night. But if they let him speak on Oscars night, I think he would be the one guy who would do it. And if Wagner Moura from The Secret Agent could pull off the upset and win best actor, he is a very actually well-spoken guy. If you've ever seen interviews of him, he has some strong opinions and he expresses himself very well, and I'm sure he would be happy to have a few pointed words on the stage if he got the win, but that seems very unlikely.
Yeah, I mean, not impossible, but I think it's seeming more and more unlikely.
Yeah.
The fact that at the BAFTAs that Timmy didn't end up winning is really interesting to me, actually. Like the fact that, it was seeming like this is his race to lose at this point, and the fact that he was not able to pull it off, even though there was Robert Aramayo.
Yeah, somebody forgot to tell Robert Aramayo
in that race. It does say that maybe they're losing some steam here, because like I am not seeing a ton of love for Marty Supreme anymore. It feels really, really tempered.
The smear campaign worked.
It worked. Damn. They got him.
Yep, they killed it. It's dead in the water. Sorry, Jimmy. Better luck next year.
They do those in ping pong, right? That's.
I was going to say that's not going to work in the audio version, but I'm not sure it worked in the video version. Craig, have you picked up on any other news that you think is significant in the past week?
Well, speaking of Timmy, they did do a screening of Marty Supreme, like a guild screening at the Academy Museum. And he was in attendance, and apparently, even though it was an industry event, he got hounded for photos for like hours after. Interesting, maybe doesn't mean anything, but just kind of speaks to his currency as a movie star, that even within the industry, that these people that are surrounded by stars are clamoring to see him.
They just want to get a jacket.
But yeah, that's about it since our last show, I think. Did you see anything?
No. Other than the BAFTAs, I feel like there hasn't been any big news, and we wait to see now what happens at the Screen Actors Guild Awards, which will be kind of the next big precedent before we head into Hollywood's biggest night in a couple of weeks.
Yeah. I can't wait to talk about Hollywood's first biggest night.
You know what? That's an excellent idea, Craig. So why don't we talk about how this whole little Academy Awards shindig came together in the first place? So we've talked about past Academy Awards before, but we've never drilled this deep before. So why don't we drill all the way down to the bedrock and discuss the first ever Academy Awards, which were held in 1929, and they were honoring films from 1927 and 1928. I will try to avoid calling them the Oscars, because the word Oscars wasn't used for another few years, but I probably will anyways. Who cares? So I feel like, to start the discussion, we should probably just place ourselves at like kind of the point where the Academy of Motion Pictures Arts and Sciences was created, which is the year 1927. And I feel like for anybody who doesn't know, it's important to stress just how big the movies were in the 20s. Like, cinema was huge in the 20s, and by 1927, it was really like such a massive industry and a massive force shaping the culture in America. It was the fourth largest industry in America. The movie industry was by 1927. There were about There were about 800 pictures a year coming out, and there were approximately 25,000 movie theaters across America in 1927, which is a lot. Today, there are somewhere between 5,000 and 6,000 movie theaters across America.
Jesus Christ.
Now, it's true that in those days, almost all movie theaters were single screens, and nowadays a lot of movie theaters are multiplexes. So the number of total screens is probably higher. There's probably about 40,000 screens right now. But when you consider the fact that the population of America is 3 times what it was then, even a number of screens per capita, there was more screens in the 20s, and there was way more actual theaters. So basically every town had a movie theater. It was huge. So in the kind of the jazz age, there's the roaring 20s, that the period after the First World War, when there was these huge cultural upheavals and a lot of more like moral permissiveness, and in the worlds of arts, it was kind of the explosion of high modernism. Cinema was always a huge part of this in America, specifically, in other countries too, but definitely the consolidation of Hollywood's power in America was huge, because it wasn't just reflecting the cultural changes, it was also driving the cultural changes. You have to consider that with all these movie theaters everywhere, people in small towns in the middle of whatever, Wisconsin, Idaho, are seeing the way that people are living, or a simulation of the way people are living in Chicago, New York, and LA. So it's really spreading the culture too. So I feel like it's just, as a starting off point, it's important to underline how huge cinema was at that point, which is also kind of at peak silent film. Around the time that these Oscar ceremony is held, we are kind of right at the cusp of the switch between silent film to talking pictures, which is something that really plays into the movies that we see. So it's almost kind of a high watermark of creativity and innovation in the world of silent film before the switch to talkies really took away a lot of that artistry that we saw in the silent films, because just for technological reasons, once you were recording the actors, they had to be close to microphones. Things got a little more stagey for that way. And also the cameras made a lot of noises. So cameras had to be put in these big boxes that would try to keep the noise away from the mics, which removed a lot of the mobility from the cameras that was starting to be exploited by a lot of the great filmmakers who we'll talk about once we get to this late 20s period of great creativity. So this was kind of a certain way of making movies that was sort of reaching its apex before it kind of got all changed by the advent of silent film. So the people who were the producers in charge of Hollywood in those days all had pretty similar biographies. They were almost all Eastern European Jews who were raised poor, usually by families that came over to America when they were children. Most of them came from regions in the Russian Empire. And the most powerful figure by that point was the guy who is the most important figure in creating the Academy, which is Louis B. Mayer. Louis B. Mayer was born probably in 1884, probably in modern-day Ukraine, but was raised in St. John, New Brunswick. His family was very poor. At age 12, Lazar Mayer, as he was originally named, had already dropped out of school because he was collecting scrap metal and selling it as a way to try to support his unintegrated Yiddish-speaking family. And by age 20, he had moved to Boston, where he managed to buy a rundown theater, which he eventually converted into an early movie house, and that kind of set him on the career path of making it to Hollywood. And by 1924, which is when Meyer's production studio merged with Marcus Lowe's movie studio, which was Metro Pictures, along with Samuel Goldwyn's movie studio. They created a new super studio, which was Metro Goldwyn Mayer, MGM, with Louis B. Mayer as head of production. So Louis B. Mayer essentially became the most powerful man in Hollywood when his studio was merged with Marcus Lowe's studio, Metro Pictures, and Samuel Goldwyn's studio to create a sort of super studio, which was Metro Goldwyn Mayer, MGM. And Mayer was installed as the head of production for MGM. So at that point, we're in 1924, Mayer has essentially been kind of crowned as the king of Hollywood, as the most powerful producer in town. And it was in 1927, with movies at this kind of huge high watermark of popularity and influence, that Meyer decides to create an academy, the Academy of Motion Pictures Arts and Sciences, as an organization of different people involved in different aspects of filmmaking to work together. So why does he want to do this? There's a couple of reasons why Meyer wanted to create this organization beyond just the appearance of cooperation and promoting the cinematic arts. Because even though movies were like super important and the industry was so powerful at this point, there was a lot of threats to their way of running business in Los Angeles at that point. And there were some issues that were threatening to really upend the industry as it was being practiced at the time. Basically, there was an internal threat and an external threat. The internal threat was unionism, and the external threat was censorship. So let's just start with censorship. So like I mentioned, this is a period of big cultural upheaval in the United States and in the world. But in the United States in particular, like whenever there is a period of great cultural upheaval, there's a reactionary force that opposes it. And there were a lot of moralists at the time who were concerned about the decline of good Christian values in America. These were often religious figures, often influential Protestants, and there was also what was called women's clubs at the time. There was groups of women who would organize in their communities to try to rally the government to promote better values and better morals in the community. They had won these kind of moralist forces had won a huge victory in 1920 when they convinced the government to ban the sale of alcohol when the passing of the 18th Amendment. It's the 18th Amendment, I think. Yeah. Anyways, right. Yeah. So which is the start of the Prohibition era. And a lot of the same groups that were active in pushing for the passage of the 18th Amendment to ban alcohol then turned their attention to movies as like this next force, which is corrupting society. There were a lot of big scandals at the time involving big movie stars, including figures like Fatty Arbuckle, which is a very well-known one. A lot of ink was spilled, especially in the newspapers of William Randolph Hearst, which were more conservative-leaning about all these things that were going on in Hollywood. So these people, on the one hand, a lot of them were just not necessarily happy that people in these small towns in Idaho and Wisconsin could see scenes of nightlife and the way people are living in, jazz age Chicago, and, unaccompanied young women going out and smoking and drinking champagne all night and stuff. And they didn't love seeing this culture being brought to their communities. They had this idea of Hollywood as this kind of new Babylon, the city of sin, where everybody is fallen and degenerate. That was promoted by newspapers. And it also wasn't lost on these people that all the big producers in Hollywood were Jews. That was part of it too. One of the people who was part of the movement that created that crafted the 18th Amendment, William Crafts, who was the head of, I think it was called the International Reform Bureau. He had a quote where he said, "The Hollywood is run by the devil and 500 Jews." And there are other prominent anti-Semites like Henry Ford, who were calling attention to the problem of, Jews running Hollywood. So because of this, there was a lot of people that were clamoring for the government to control the movies more, to censor the movies more. Since 1922, the Hollywood was working a little bit more closely with the government because William Hayes, who was a former postmaster general, former chair of the Republican National Committee, had kind of joined Hollywood as the head of an organization that was the Motion Picture Association, which was a trade association. So their job was basically to liaise between the government and cinema. So they were kind of keeping an eye on cinema more closely, but there was a lot of panic from the producers that the government was really going to crack down. The other threat was the internal threat of unionism. So the producers often took advantage of a pretty anti-labor environment in California at the time. They were able to work their craftspeople long hours without overtime pay. The actors too did not have a lot of representation in cinema at the time. So as the movie industry became so big, a lot of people were pushing for better labor rights, and the actors were a big part of this. One of the reasons is that a lot of people from the theater scene in New York City, started moving to Los Angeles to make a go at the movies. New York City has a lot more of a robust labor rights environment, and including for actors in the theater who were represented by Actors Equity. So when they came to LA, a lot of these actors were like, what the hell, you guys are working without union protection. You guys are doing like 14-hour days and there's no union that's looking out for you. So Actors Equity in particular had started trying to kind of put their feelers into the actors working in Hollywood and trying to push to create new conventions and promote and recruit more people to Actors Equity. So this was really kind of an ongoing thing that was creating a lot of tension and suspicion between the producers and the craftspeople and the actors, that they were looking askance at each other, afraid that on the producer side, they were afraid they wouldn't be able to work the way that they've been working if these unions get too much control, that it's going to, ruin their profitability. And movies are getting a lot more expensive at this point too. So the producers are really worried about ballooning costs and are often trying to cut costs, whereas the actors and the craftspeople were worried about getting rights and getting fair representation. So the idea really behind the Academy for Louis Mayer was that if you have this organization of prominent people working in different fields in Hollywood, for the outside world, you can say, look, we're taking care of it. You don't need to censor us because these upstanding pillars of our industry are going to be, supervising everything we do and make sure that everything is conforming with good Christian morals. And inside the industry, they could say, like, look, you guys don't need unions because we have this internal body, which you've got your representatives, the actors, you have your actor representatives in the union, the technicians, you have your representative down in the union, the Academy. They're looking out for your interests. We're doing it. We're looking out for you internally because we have this body here. That was kind of the idea behind the Academy. And the Academy's relationships with unions is a little complicated, or becomes complicated in the coming year. So it's maybe not totally fair to just represent it as an anti-union body, even though it was definitely conceived that way. And they did succeed in stemming the tide of unionism for a couple of years, through some battles between the Academy and Actors Equity. But ultimately, the Academy did end up being used as a tool to promote the creation of the guilds, and now Hollywood is a union town, and the Academy was part of the creation of the guilds eventually. So the history becomes more complicated, but in the early days, it's pretty clear that it was founded as kind of an anti-union body, and it was more labor sympathetic publications covered it that way at the time too. This wasn't like some big secret. Like, labor-friendly publications were saying that this new Academy thing is just a way for the producers to ensure that they can maintain control over the industry, which gives you a sense of the kind of those tensions that were bubbling at the time. So the members of the Academy originally was 36 people. There were a number of important producers, including, of course, Louis B. Mayer was a member of the Academy himself, as were two of the Warner brothers. There were some prominent directors, including Raoul Walsh. There was a couple writers, and there was a few hand-picked important actors, like the comedian Harold Lloyd was in there. Comrade Nagel, who was a matinee idol, who was heavily involved in union activities at that time. And there was also, most importantly, Hollywood's biggest power couple, Douglas Fairbanks and Mary Pickford, who were recruited. That was very important for Louis Mayer to recruit Douglas Fairbanks and Mary Pickford. Douglas Fairbanks became the first Academy president, and Mary Pickford also did a lot of the public-facing work of the Academy. So he really wanted these two people to be the face of the Academy. And the reason was that, well, on the one hand, they were both Christians, and they were known to be practicing Christians, and they were known to be people who kind of were more moral in the way they presented themselves. Parties at their place involved no alcohol and no jazz music.
Well, wasn't Mary Pickford like sneaking off with what's his name, Buddy Rogers or whatever?
That's possible. And Mary Pickford did actually become an alcoholic later in life, but at the time was at least presenting a facade of respectability, which, there were a lot of scandals in her life too. But for a long time, she managed to kind of stay above the fray, even though one of the biggest scandals at the time was her brother, who had his fiance die in his hotel room or something. But anyways, Mary Pickford was generally seen as America's sweetheart was the label that was attached to her, and people really did see them as like generally Christian, moral folks, and also they were actors. So Meyer and the producers obviously wanted actors to head the organization because the biggest tensions were between the producers and the actors. It couldn't be a producer in the head. They had to try to show that no, like this is your organization for you guys. So originally it was these 36 kind of mandarins of Hollywood. They would expand it very soon after. They had a kind of a drive to recruit more people from the industry, and within a few months, they had 250 people who were members of the Academy, all kind of important people in the various fields of film production. And one of the lines of text in their founding documents, which is kind of a bunch of different ideas. They're kind of just spitballing in this founding document for different things that they could do, different activities they could have throughout the year. One of the ideas was that there should be an annual awards of merit to celebrate cooperation and the advancements and the greatness of the film industry or something like that. In later years, Meyer would claim that the Academy Awards were all his idea, and he did it because he could control actors by giving them little trophies. But he was very into self-promotion and liked to give quotes like that later in his years. Actual documents from the time showed that he didn't really care about the idea of having awards that much. It was really Frank Woods, who served as secretary of the Academy, who kind of really pushed for this idea that that line about having awards of merit, we should really do that. That'd be really cool. So it took a little while. It was actually 2 years after the founding of the Academy where it finally got off the ground. But they did eventually get around to selecting by vote some people to be nominees and to be winners. Well, actually just runners up and winners. They were announced ahead of time in February of 1929. And then later that year in May at the Roosevelt Hotel, they held a ceremony where statuettes were handed out to winners and certificates were handed out to runners up. It wasn't a big ceremony as it would be in later years. I think it ran to like half an hour or something. And it wasn't on the radio. It wasn't televised. Television didn't exist, but it wasn't a big ceremony, but they did have a selection of winners. They did have a selection of runners-ups. Looking at it now at the list of like who won and stuff, it's a little different. It was kind of the next year where they starting to standardize it in the format that we can recognize today. So there are some things about it that are a little different. One of them is that for most awards, they gave the award to a person, but not necessarily to their work on a particular film. So for some people, different films were cited in the text of the award that was given to them. Sometimes it's actually really not clear, like looking at the original documents, what was being awarded or who was being awarded for what. The Academy has kind of retconned some of the stuff and kind of made it a little bit clearer. But maybe the biggest change is that there actually was not a Best Picture at the first Academy Awards of 1929. They handed out one trophy for Outstanding Picture, or Outstanding Production, I think it was called, which went to Wings. And then they handed a different trophy for Best Unique and Artistic Production, which went to Sunrise. Now, when the Academy kind of retconned it a bit to try to kind of clean up in later years the official lists of winners and nominees, they decided that the award for Outstanding Production that went to Wings should be considered the equivalent of Best Picture. So that's why when you look at a list of Best Picture winners today, you will always see Wings listed as the first Best Picture winner. That's slightly wrong. At least that's at the time, there was no distinction made between one of these trophies, between the one given to Sunrise for unique and artistic picture and the one given to Wings for outstanding picture. That one is preeminent above the other. They were both presented as though they were equal things. So Wings is kind of considered the first Best Picture winner today. Not quite the case. I'll say that when we were listing our favorite Best Picture winners, I considered being really annoyingly technical about it and saying that Sunrise counts as a Best Picture winner. It's as much of a Best Picture as winner as Wings. So I could list Sunrise. Decided not to do that though. I thought I'd save my pedantism for this episode. Really. So yeah, there's a lot of really cool movies that are on this list. This snapshot of this period where Hollywood is transitioning from silent film to sound film is really interesting. And I'm going to call all these movies silent films, with the exception of The Jazz Singer, which is actually getting a special trophy here. They decided to not make The Jazz Singer, which was, of course, the first real talkie, that the one that really changed the industry. They decided to not make it eligible for the other awards, but instead gave it a special trophy for technical achievement. With the exception of that, I'm going to call all these silent films. But again, we are we're on the frontier. We're on this borderland. So it is kind of unclear. Most of these movies were either released with a synchronized music track, or they were later re-released with a synchronized music track, or, which is more often the case, they were released in two versions, a fully silent version and a version with a synchronized music track. Because again, this is a period where it's really, we're really changing over. It's really in development. I think you can compare the movie-going experience to kind of understand it for most Americans at the time to maybe that the last time there's a 3D boom after Avatar, 2010 to 2012-ish, where if you wanted to see Transformers Revenge of the Fallen, most cinemas would just be showing a 2D version. And if you just have a small local cinema, that's all they would show. But if you had a cinema that was a little more retrofitted with the latest technology, they might be offering the choice of seeing it in a 3D for a slightly higher price. It was often like that with these films in the sense that most cinemas would have just the silent film, but maybe the nicer cinemas, especially in the cities, would have the technology to project it with a synchronized music score, which would either be the movie tone technology, where you actually have a disc which is mechanically supposed to be synchronized to the movie if the gadget has been calibrated correctly, which apparently it often wasn't, or you
got to start it right when the lion roars.
Or it was Vitaphone, which actually was. Vitaphone is sound on film technology, so there is actually a strip of apertures on the edge of the film strip, which the light signals that go through the apertures are actually triggering the music, so it's guaranteed to be synced up with the image, even though the sound quality was apparently very bad in early Vitaphone pictures. Which is to say, pedants might be these, Sunrise isn't actually a silent film because it was released as a Vitaphone, but these are all movies that have no audible dialogue. So right. That's
can I be super pedantic for 1 second?
Do it.
There's that one moment when they're blocking traffic in Sunrise, and you do hear, "Hey, come on! Hey, what are you doing? Hey!" in the audio.
I'll give you that one. So why don't we just start off with those two big winners, Sunrise and Wings, in this strange decision to give them each an equivalent trophy, but calling one outstanding and calling the other unique and artistic. What you guys have seen both these movies, right?
Yeah. These are the two I was able to rewatch for this.
Nice. Any thoughts on them? Do you think the Academy made good choices?
I like giving them both a trophy because they both kick ass.
Yeah, I agree. I think that these are both really great.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely hold Sunrise in higher regard. I love Sunrise, really love it. If I had been able to convince myself to consider it a Best Picture winner, it would have been number one, my favorite Best Picture winner, because I think Sunrise is really one of the masterpieces of Hollywood cinema in like the poetic mode. It is it is a movie that has a kind of dreamlike quality where the emotions, the sentiment, the freedom, the humiliation, and everything just seems to register on that kind of poetic level. A movie directed by F.W. Murnau, who had recently signed a contract with Fox. Another reason why the late 20s cinema was so interesting was that you had these immigrants coming from the German system, and the German system had been very kind of rigorously artistic, very famously so throughout the 20s. And more and more of the German filmmakers were starting to come over to Hollywood, tempted by contracts, and especially in around the 1930 to 1933 period, afraid of the government, and they start to bring a lot of real technical rigor, and also like artistic modes. Like the Germans had. They had special German words for the kind of we're familiar with using the word expressionism for really the films of Murnau in particular, and movies like The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. But there was also another current for kind of chamber movies about social issues. And that Sunrise is really kind of the two ideas going together. And a lot of that has to do with the camera technique and a lot of attention being paid to the camera's subjectivity, which is something that became a big object of study, and the period where film criticism really started taking off in the 50s and 60s. And Karl Strauss, who was a cinematographer who worked with Murnau in Germany, had created the idea that he called unchained camera, which refers to the camera's ability to move subjectively in different angles. And Murnau brought that idea with him to America. And it was a big deal for Fox to get Murnau. He was just this towering figure, literally a towering figure. Different sources list his height as anywhere between 6'4" and an improbable 7 feet. There were some sources that claimed he should have hooped. He was born just a little too early. He should have hooped. But yeah, just like a very imperious, commanding, kind of well-read intellectual German. And what he was able to pull off with Sunrise is really something special.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hadn't seen Sunrise until preparing for this. I saw Richard Linklater's Legacy prequel, but hadn't seen this. I was blown away by this, and I thought Wings was great as well, but Sunrise just really blew me away. The pacing is incredible, and the performances are just awesome. Yeah, Janet Gaynor's performance is unreal in this movie, and it's crazy how much it still resonates to this day. And it's paired with these big expressionist performances, and hers is really grounded, and it really it really resonates. And I keep thinking about that sequence where they're on the boat, and she there's long shots of her looking lovingly at her husband and slowly coming to the realization that he's going to drown her, and it turns to horror as he basically becomes a monster in the boat. It's amazing.
Yeah, the emotions are so turned up.
I do like how amplified I don't have the actor's name, but the husband isn't you just say he's literally turning into a monster with the hunched posture, and to get that contrast of that very expressive stuff and her kind of groundedness. Yeah, she's incredible.
Totally.
Yeah. And she won Best Actress that year. Though this is one of those awards where they name the actress and they cite a few different films. So not just that. She's listed as winning Best Actress for Seventh Heaven, Street Angel, and Sunrise. Seventh Heaven and Street Angel were both directed by Frank Borzaghi. They were all made around the same time. Actually, Sunrise and Street Angel were being filmed simultaneously. So Janet Gaynor would do half the day. She would she would be working with Murnau on Sunrise, and then the other half of the day she'd be working on Street Angel with Borzage. That was more common in those days. You'd be filming 2 movies at once. One you do the daytime shots, the other you do the nighttime. But yeah, she really is really good. She projects a lot of like vulnerability, just a lot of attentiveness to everything that's going on with the other people around her, and that's a good pick. Seventh Heaven, that Frank Borzage movie I mentioned, is also a runner-up for Outstanding Picture. So, well, let me just list them out. Outstanding Picture, which was won by Wings, has 2 runners-up: Seventh Heaven, the Frank Borzage movie, and The Racket, which is a crime drama. Directed by Louis Milestone, which is a movie produced by Howard Hughes. And then Best Unique and Artistic Picture, the winner is Sunrise, and the runners-up are Chang, a sort of ethno-documentary, and The Crowd by King Vidor. Let's just talk about Wings a bit, because we haven't really done that. You guys say you both like the movie a lot.
I liked it. I think that there's sequences in it that rule. The pacing, I feel it's a bit long. It kind of struggled to hold my attention at parts, and I feel like it has really high highs and lower lows. Like there's some troughs in that movie. One of the real highlights for me is Richard Arlen's performance. I think he has like a fantastic performance. I am a lot less high on Buddy Rogers' performance as Jack. I thought that was like really simple and like annoying, to be honest. And
hooray for Bubbles.
without using that to any sort of specific effect. Like it was unnecessarily annoying to me. But the sequences, like the air battles, are great. There's like that whole scene with the bubbles and the like that dolly shot that goes right through is just like There's a lot of really great stuff. Clara Bow is also really fantastic in this movie, awesome. I think. So I liked it a lot. The only other movie out of the 2 like Best Picture categories that I've seen is The Crowd, which fucking rules. Like, if you haven't seen this movie, you got to check it out because it is great. I think that was actually the first like silent film that I ever watched, and really was like, oh, there's a lot of value here, and that movie kicks ass.
Yeah, the crowd is definitely a really cool movie. I just want to talk about Wings a little bit, and then we can maybe talk about The Crowd too, because I agree with you. It's awesome. I love Clara Bow in Wings. Talking about the performances, I think that she's kind of acting laps around all the guys. The role that she plays was expanded for her, like after production had already started. When production started, Clara Bow was not a big star, but she became a big star during production because the movie It came out, and It was a huge hit.
She was Pennywise.
The non Stephen King related It movie was a like a romance comedy that became a huge hit because everybody was like really into Clara Bow's performance of it. She was like 21 years old at the time. She was really young, and just kind of embodied the kind of sexy flapper ideal that people really loved. And she was the highest grossing star for the next 2 years. After that, it became such a phenomenon that because of her, that it's the origin of the expression "the It Girl" that we still use today, because everybody referred to her as the It Girl because of that movie. But because she became a big star during production, they kind of hastily like expanded her role in Wings to try to give her a little bit more screen time. And then release posters that are like Clara Bow in Wings when she was originally just supposed to be a supporting actor.
That makes sense, because this feels originally like a movie about 2 guys who realize they're bisexual and perfect for one another. But then, we got to get Clara Bow in there.
You're right though. I feel it almost kind of presages like Top Gun.
The tenderness between Jack and Dave when Dave is dying is like orders of magnitude more palpable on the screen than like the kiss at the end of the movie. Like those men are in love.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I feel like it does kind of presage Top Gun in that way, where it's like these people who love flying in the air and can't actually connect to women on the ground are maybe just repressed homosexuals and just have a weird way of showing it. And, Wings was a movie that was like unreasonably expensive for the time. It cost $2 million to make, which was basically unheard of. All that was really the result of its director, William Wellman, known as Wild Bill, who was he was like a Boston Brahmin who became a decorated World War I fighter pilot. And he cultivated Hollywood friends. After the war, he set up a flying school in San Diego. And on the weekends, he would fly down to LA, where Douglas Fairbanks let him use his private polo course as a landing strip. And he eventually wormed his way into the world of cinema first as an actor and eventually became a director. Wings was a Paramount movie, and he drove Adolf Zucker, the head of Paramount, insane on it because he was very stubborn and had a lot of demands. The movie ended up taking 9 months to shoot, which was extremely long for the time when movies were often shot in like 1 month in those days. So having a 9-month shoot that cost $2 million was considered outrageous at the time. But it ended up making more than its budget back because it was a huge hit. One of the reasons why it dragged on was that he had the smart idea of recognizing that if you're going to film planes in the sky, it's only going to look cool to the audience if there's clouds behind the planes. You need a point of reference to clock the motion. So he would waste a lot of time waiting for the clouds to come in, waiting for the clouds to form, which drove the producers nuts. But you see the result in the film. Not only does it provide a point of reference, which gives you a more sense of action, and there is like good action scenes, but also a lot of the shots of the clouds are really beautiful. He captured some very beautiful skies using the technology of the day. We do have a very good restoration of Wings 2, almost too good. I think they almost cleaned it up too much. I feel like they did too much work on it that I wonder if that's actually how it would have looked today. But that's because in 2012, Paramount was celebrating its 100th anniversary, and they decided as part of the celebrations to invest, I think, $600,000 in doing a very deep restoration of Wings, which very, very few silent films have ever had the chance to get that kind of attentive treatment. Paramount even released Wings in theaters for 1 day only as part of their celebrations. Cool. There was 1 day in 2012 where you could have gone into a theater and chosen between going to see The Avengers or Wings. But I'm happy that we get to see the sky in at least in like a very clear print, which isn't always the case. I don't think that Wings is like on the same level of artistry as Sunrise or even The Crowd, but I think it's a very good fun movie that is like it's a real popcorn muncher. There's a lot of fun stuff in there.
It's also just refreshing in the current climate to see a movie about a real American hero like Herman Schwimpf.
Yeah.
I love Herman.
Yeah, he's great. Yeah. But also, like, you think of that scene where he's in the bar and he's seeing the bubbles and stuff. That's like, it's funny, it's goofy, but I think considering like how many people at the time were World War I veterans, I think that would have really have read as somebody with what we now call PTSD. Shell shock would have been the term they used at the time. It is also, I think, addressing like the mental carnage that people are going through in the war, as well as like it's extremely romanticizing, obviously, but I think it's romanticizing in a way that actually is aware of the reality of it, because Wellman himself was a World War I veteran, and a lot of the people working on the movie were as well, and a lot of people seeing the movie were as well. It's 1927. The world is full of World War I veterans.
There's one moment in the battle scene that is like one of the most brutal things I've seen in any war movie, when the tank runs over the machine gun nest.
Yeah.
Like, that is like,
it's harsh.
That's heavy.
Yeah. So You brought up the crowd, Craig, and I really want to pivot back to that. So I mentioned Sunrise was given Best Unique and Artistic Picture, and two movies, Chang and The Crowd, were listed as runners-up. The Crowd is the only MGM movie that's actually among these six finalists. Which you could think is a little weird, considering that Louis B. Mayer, the head of MGM, was the guy who was pushing for the Academy in the first place, but apparently he wasn't too hands-on about the awards. And some people have also theorized that he was intentionally trying to make MGM movies not get nominated because he didn't want it to look like it was all him running the show.
Yeah.
But The Crowd was actually a movie that Louis Mayer hated. He did not want to make this movie. He did not like this movie. As a bit of background, King Vidor, who was I used to think King Vidor was German because his name sounds German to me. No, he's all American. This guy's from Galveston, Texas. He made The Crowd kind of as his blank check movie. The movie he made before was The Big Parade, which was a World War I drama, which was a huge box office smash. And because The Big Parade was so successful, he could kind of do what he wanted for his next movie. And he was really obsessed with this idea of making a big spectacle that was about the most ordinary guy living the most kind of sad sack, grimy, ordinary life possible. That was the idea behind The Crowd. Louis Mayer didn't get it, but he got the movie made the way he wanted it to. Craig, what do you like about The Crowd?
Everything. I think that the performances in it are fantastic. It's shot like beautifully. Like there's just like such great cinematography in this. And I think it's like really powerfully written. Like it feels like a precursor to like Death of a Salesman, this American dream, this unattainable American dream that this guy is striving for and living in the shadow of. I think it's just like incredibly like powerful and even still feels very contemporary today. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, it really hasn't aged today. It's a very it's a pretty searing movie. That's one thing that some of those 20s movies are really good at. It's just being like very like brutally searing and just like it's a harsh, depressing movie, but it is great. You mentioned the acting. The lead actor was a guy named James Murray. Yeah, he was basically a nobody at the time. Was doing like extra work and stuff at the point where when King Vidor, as he tells it, like saw him walking around the studio one day and was like, I want that guy. He's got the look I want. But ended up being kind of a tragic figure. He did get a lot more work after The Crowd, including a number of starring roles, but he was an alcoholic and it ruined his career. And King Vidor would talk about later in life how, years later he saw James Murray drunk on the street in Skid Row. And not too long after that, his body was found drowned in New York City. Possible suicide, possible accidental drowning, unknown.
That story about King Vidor running into him on like Skid Row is that James Murray like approached him asking for money, and King Vidor obviously recognized him. It's like, hey, let's go grab a drink, just what James Murray needed, I guess. And he was like, I'm making The Crowd too, and I want you to return. And it made James Murray irate and basically told him to shove it up his ass, and that was it.
Yeah, The Crowd 2 did get made. It's called Our Daily Bread.
Right.
But both the actors were recast. Both the roles were recast with new actors. And King Vidor, he spent a lot of the last years of his life trying to get funding for a screenplay that he wrote called The Actor, which was which was inspired by James Murray's life. So that was clearly something that really stuck with him to the end of his life. He was trying to find a way to process that, I guess.
Yeah, I find the parallels between James Murray and the John Sims character that he plays within The Crowd really interesting, because if I remember correctly, there's a point within The Crowd where he is offered like a job by his wife's brother or something like that, and he's like too proud to take it. So I really love that story about King Vidor offering him this kind of this leg up, this role in The Crowd too, to try to kind of lift him back up again, and him being too proud to take it.
Yeah. Yeah. So for best unique and artistic picture, the third movie there was Chang. Do either guys know what this is? Have you seen Chang?
No idea.
You should watch Chang. I'm going to say you should watch Chang. So it's kind of, we would probably call it a documentary today. At the time, that kind of, there wasn't really a clear definition for documentary. Like narrative documentaries were kind of not a clearly formed category at that period. This was a movie made by Marion C. Cooper and Ernest B. Schudsack. These Cooper and Schudsack were two guys who met in Europe during World War I. And they're very adventurous dudes who, had a big appetite for exploring the world. They started working together when Cooper was part of a project to try to find a race of monkey-tailed men that were supposed to live in the Malay Peninsula.
Yep.
Yeah. You know the guys I'm talking about, right? And when the cameraman he's working with left because he was afraid of the dangerous conditions, he wrote to Schudsack and was like, "You got to come down there and help me out on this." I never ended up getting that footage, unfortunately. So that role's still out there. Somebody else could do that. But they ended up kind of shooting kind of ethnographic footage around the world. Before Chang, they had made a movie called Grass, which I also strongly recommend. For Grass, they embedded themselves with a group of people known as the Bakhtiari. The Bakhtiari live mostly in Iran, in northern and western Iran. Yeah, so they used to do this huge migration where there'd be like 50,000 people, I think, who would do a yearly migration, a seasonal migration between a region of Turkey and what is now modern day Iran, and bring all their goats with them. They're searching out seasonal grazing grounds, and they captured some really cool footage of them, moving through a mountain pass. And the most dramatic part is they have to fjord a river, and it's really dangerous. And they do it on inflated goat skins. Really cool. And it's on the strength of Grass that they got a bigger budget to go to Siam, to modern day Thailand, to film Chang. Chang is kind of something on the border between documentary and fiction. It probably owes a lot to Robert Flaherty, who's kind of sometimes considered the father of documentary. Robert Flaherty had made Nanook of the North in, I believe, 1925, which was filmed in the north of Quebec. And that was a movie where it was basically completely staged, but it was filmed on site with local people. And Chang was kind of in the same mold. It's filmed in a region of northern Thailand, and it is all staged. Like, they built like huts in the jungle as like sets, and then picked local people to be like, okay, you're going to be the family, and you're going to live in the jungle, and you're going to do this, and you're going to run from the leopard and stuff. And they choreographed a bunch of ridiculous scenes involving animals and their interactions. But like, it is on site, and it is using those real people. So it's on that weird borderland, like Nanook of the North. It's kind of, apparently Chang is still well liked in Thailand. The way Nanook of the North, I know, is actually well liked by a lot of Inuit people, even though it's completely staged. It's still like the only surviving document we have of that era, of those people in that era. Like, there's no other footage of them. So it's still an interesting and important document. And Chang is a riot. They've got this amazing scene where a herd of elephants tramples a whole village. Again, they provoke the elements to trample a fake village they built. It's fake, but the footage is so cool. And also, the real star of Chang is a gibbon named Bimbo, and they very quickly seem to decide that they want to tell the story from Bimbo's perspective. So Bimbo becomes the star, and Bimbo is so expressive and so funny. And yeah, I'm sorry to Emil Jannings, who won Best Actor that year. It should have been Bimbo. Bimbo got robbed. Anyways, I strongly recommend Chang. It's a weird movie. And so after that, Cooper and Schudsack would eventually go on to make King Kong, which is their big claim to fame. Yeah, King Kong kind of incorporates some of the ideas that they've been working on. And, by that point, obviously, they transitioned to full fiction, but there's still kind of a bit of the self-insert things. It's slightly autobiographical in that it's about these filmmakers going to a different part of the world and seeking adventure and all that stuff. So very, very interesting filmmakers who made some very interesting documents and films. I like it a lot. So yeah, and then outstanding picture, Wings, Seventh Heaven, The Racket. I guess Seventh Heaven is really good. Actually, I think it's Frank Borzaghi. It's melodrama, romantic melodrama, but pretty good. The Racket is not actually that great, and I'm a little surprised that they gave that the nomination rather than Underworld, which is the kind of the big gangster movie of 1927, which was nominated elsewhere. But let's move down the list. There was 2 Best Directing awards given out. One was for Comedy Picture, which went to Louis Milestone for 2 Arabian Nights. And then Best Directing Dramatic Picture went to Frank Borzaghi for Seventh Heaven. And then the Actor Awards, Best Actor, I mentioned it in passing, went to Emil Jannings. While I'm on topic, there is a popular story out there that it was actually supposed to go to an animal, that was supposed to go to Rin Tin Tin, the dog. This idea was popularized by Susan Orleans in a book. She said that she found evidence in the Academy Archive that Rin Tin Tin got more votes than Emil Jannings did. But I think the scholarly consensus is that she was duped by joke votes that some people had cast. But anyways, the actual winner was the German actor Emil Jannings, who was a great actor. Did a lot of great work with Murnau when they're both back in Germany. The Last Laugh and Faust they did together. The Last Command is a movie made by Josef von Sternberg, an Austrian, a Viennese man who was still pretty early in his career. He had a couple kind of false starts with United Artists and with MGM. At this point, he had just signed a contract with Paramount, which was kind of a last chance for him because producers didn't really like him. And he had made Underworld, which won for Best Writing. And Underworld is kind of often considered the first proper gangster movie, which was a huge hit at the time. So The Last Command for Josef von Sternberg, that was his blank check movie, the way that The Crowd was King Vidor's blank check movie. And have either of you guys seen The Last Command?
No.
Amazing. So I'd never seen it before this week. I love von Sternberg. I've seen a lot of his movies, but that's one that's escaped my attention. And I said, I'll watch it because apparently that's the one that Emil Jannings won Best Actor for. It's so good. It's so good. It's Emil Jannings plays like a Russian general on the eve of the revolution. And it's bookended by scenes set in modern day Hollywood. And we realize that the producer that's hiring his character who's now all washed up to be an extra in his movie was like a revolutionary in Russia. And it was von Sternberg's movies have just these amazing images and just a lot of desire. And Emil Jannings is so good. So I think that's a really good choice for Best Actor. Emil Jannings would have kind of a sordid end to his career. He would make a movie not too long after this with Marlene Dietrich, The Blue Angel, which was kind of Marlene Dietrich's breakout role. That was a German Hollywood co-production. For The Blue Angel, they would do a scene and they would do the dialogue in English, then they'd reshoot it in German. And audiences did not like Emil Jannings in talkies because he had a thick German accent. So did Marlene Dietrich, but she was hot and charming, so nobody cared that she spoke with an accent. But with Emil Jannings, it was a problem. So while Dietrich became a big star in Hollywood, Emil Jannings, who felt like he was spurned from Hollywood, he went back to Germany. All these people working in the German industry were moving to Hollywood because Hitler was rising to power. Jannings did the opposite. He fled Hollywood and went back to Germany. Was embraced by Joseph Goebbels, did a lot of propaganda movies for Germany. Where the story goes that when his village was liberated, he ran out to the American soldiers waving his Oscar in the air to be like, look, I love America. I have an Oscar. But yeah, his career did not recover from that point. He had the stink of Nazi on him for the rest of his life. But in his day was an amazing actor.
We should have stuck to that principle.
Yeah. Best actress, as we mentioned, was Janet Gaynor. There's runners-ups were Louise Dresser and Gloria Swanson, who was a big star at the time, and Sadie Thompson, a really good movie, but don't really have time to go into that. Best writing, I mentioned, went to Underworld, the Josef von Sternberg movie I mentioned, which I think is just fun to mention that because Ben Hecht wrote that. It was his first screenplay. Ben Hecht would become a big Hollywood screenwriter. That was his first Hollywood screenplay after he'd had a long career as a journalist in Chicago, writing about especially the world of crime in Chicago. He did a lot of exposés on the criminal underworld in Chicago. So his first screenplay was about the criminal underworld in Chicago. Kind of famously, he came to Hollywood on the invitation of Herman J. Mankiewicz, who was one of the top intertitle writers at the time before he became a top actual prop screenwriter in Hollywood, infamously because Herman J. Mankiewicz sent him a telegram which included the words, "There are millions to be made here, and your only competition is idiots." And Heck came down, and he did make a great career for himself, even though he tried to get his name taken off Underworld because apparently Josef von Sternberg disregarded the screenplay and kind of turned it. And whereas Ben Hecht knew a lot about the Chicago underworld, Josef von Sternberg didn't care. He made like a fantasy version of it, and which is awesome. And his fantasy version of the Chicago underworld became kind of a reference point for all these gangster movies that came afterwards. But even though Ben Hecht was angry and asked for his name to be taken off the project, he won Best Writing for that. Best Writing Original Story, and there was Best Writing Adaptation. So even in the first Oscars, we have that split between original and adaptation, and the adaptation went to Benjamin Glazer for Seventh Heaven. And this is the only Oscars where there was a Best Title Writing award for the intertitles, the cards that have dialogue on them in the middle of silent movies, and that went to Joseph Farnham, who was one of the big title card writers at the time.
They should have also had one for title design. I really love some of the title design in Sunrise and
Sunrise looks so cool.
Yeah, Sunrise is very, very creative. Yeah. Chang has some good title design too, because Chang will tell you like the animal noises. Like if there's like an elephant on the screen, they'll have like a different letter, different like fonts in different sizes at different angles appearing, being like bleed to blam, bloom, or whatever. Like very comic book. It's very fun.
The one weakness I discovered about myself in watching the movies with intertitles is that I do tend to read them in like an exaggerated Matt Berry type voice in my head. Like in Sunrise, it's been like, "Come live with me in the city."
Yeah. If I try to read them out loud, I'm always not totally sure how I should read like 2 M dashes, because they love doing that. There's always 2 M dashes. I guess it means like extra long pause, but it always feels weird.
It's because they're written by AI.
There were 2 special achievement Oscars that were handed out, which were kind of handed out to, I guess, films that the Academy wasn't really sure what to do with. And one of them was handed out to The Jazz Singer, the Al Jolson movie, which, like I mentioned, is kind of considered the first real talkie, which was a big sensation, made Al Jolson a huge star, and kind of ended up being the death knell for this world of silent cinema. Because if there were skeptics about the possibilities of sound on film before, once the Jazz Singer became a huge sensation and earned a ton of money, all the studios fell in line and were like, we have to invest in this now. So they just gave it a special technical achievement award, which kind of shows, I guess, their uneasiness with it. The other achievement award they gave to was for Charlie Chaplin for The Circus. This was kind of interesting. So Chaplin was obviously a huge star at the time. His biggest hit was The Gold Rush, which came out in 1925, a movie he wrote, produced, directed, and starred in. He had a hard time getting his next movie off the ground after The Gold Rush. There was a lot of struggles with his next movie, and that ended up being The Circus, which came out almost 3 years later, which is a big gap for the world of silent comedians who would often crank out tons of movies in every year. And The Circus is another movie he wrote, produced, directed, starred in, oversaw the musical score for, eventually wrote a new musical score for, because he was a composer as well. Though the original version, he just kind of oversaw a medley of pre-existing songs. But The Circus is a really interesting movie because it's kind of his most autobiographical film, or at least in like an allegorical way. It's about a guy who accidentally becomes a doofus who accidentally becomes a big star at the circus, and his life changes when everybody loves seeing him do silly things in the circus big tent. But the movie ends with this odd sad note where after he kind of lets his girl go, and the whole circus packs up. They take down the big tent and they all leave and go off to the next city, and they just leave him behind. And he's just sitting alone on a crate in like this kind of circle left by where the big top used to be. And the music that he originally put on that scene was kind of a slowed down, sad version of Blue Skies, the Irving Berlin song. But Blue Skies was the big hit for Al Jolson at the time. So at the time, people would have associated Blue Skies with Al Jolson and the jazz singer. And it really feels like he ends it with this moment of realizing that the circus is done, that his career as the silent movie star, this is ended, that the circus is moving on without him. The world of cinema and the world of comedy is going somewhere where he can't follow. And I thought that's a really kind of moving touch, because Chaplin famously had a hard time adjusting to talkies. Throughout the 30s, he continued to make silent films when nobody else was doing silent films. It was kind of anachronistic, but he didn't want to move on. And it really feels like in the circus that he recognized that right away, that he was going to be the guy who stays behind when the circus goes off somewhere else. And it's kind of a touching note for this movie that comes out right at this transition period.
Cool.
So I've been yammering on way too long about these things. Are there any other things about the first Academy Awards or any of these movies we've mentioned that you guys would like to bring up?
I just want to echo both of your opinions on how visually stunning both Sunrise and Wings are. But in Sunrise, there's like camera movements that are so spellbinding that it's kind of shocking to think that's like 100 years ago. I think you could do a straight line from like what Murnau's doing there to the Russian guy whose name I don't remember. The cranes are flying in Soy Cuba into like, I don't know, like Malik and Nickel Boys, just like really cool fluid camera stuff.
Yeah. And using the camera for that kind of poetic effect.
Like subjective, like you say, right? Like,
yeah.
I think that's a cornerstone of a lot of cinema that I like. And I'd seen Sunrise, I don't know, 15 years ago, but it was nice to kind of revisit it and be like, oh yeah, this is foundational to so much.
Yeah, and it's cool. And one thing that's cool is that Murnau was really recognized for that, even in his own time. A lot of his contemporaries were really eager to learn from him too. That's one thing that's a little heartening to read about this period. When he arrived at Fox, like Frank Borzaghi was the Fox director too, who made two of these movies, The Seventh Heaven and Street Angel, and he wanted to learn everything that Murnau knew and like kind of studied at his feet, even though he'd been making movies himself for a long time. The greatest directors in Hollywood recognized right away that this German guy was coming in with some techniques that he'd worked on that were beyond anything that they knew. And it reading about the period, it seems like they weren't like suspicious or jealous of it. They were like, teach me, sensei. Like we want to incorporate this in our cinema. We need to learn how this works.
Cool. Wholesome.
Yeah. Craig, any final thoughts on the first Academy Awards?
No, I feel like we've got it pretty well covered.
Yeah, probably too well, honestly. Sorry, went on way too long there. So let's keep the show rolling. Before we're going to wrap up, we always like to talk about one of the films nominated for Best Picture. There's only two left. We've done almost all of them. And we thought today that we would talk about the Brazilian entry for Best Foreign Film, which is also up for Best Picture of the Year, The Secret Agent. Sean, do you like The Secret Agent?
Yeah, I really like it. I went in with, so the only information I had about this movie was a screenshot of him saying I would kill him with a hammer on the subtitle. And I was like, that movie looks cool. And I really liked it. I am ready to become totally Brazil pilled. Like I've seen like two Brazilian movies. So now I have to see, several more. Yeah, I really liked it. With the huge caveat that I have not seen all of the nominees yet. This might be my favorite of the Best Picture ones that I have seen.
Nice. Craig, are you feeling the love for it too, or not as much?
Yeah, I am. I don't think it has surpassed one battle after another for me, but I really love this movie. It's probably in my top three, I'd say. Yeah, I thought it was great. Great performances, fantastic cast. Like this really could win the best casting. Great characters. It's really well structured, and I thought it was great.
Yeah, I think when I made my list of like favorite films of the year, I did put One Battle After Another ahead of The Secret Agent. I think I've reconsidered. I do think The Secret Agent is my favorite of this movies. I like it a lot. Like you said, Craig, the cast of characters is really good. It really gives a lot of life to the movie. You really feel like you're in this world. Both, all the kind of dissident characters are all very human and all very recognizable. Some of the other characters are a little more like goofy B-movie characters, but they also have so much presence on the screen. Like the bad guys, the kind of comic bad guys who are comic but also sinister.
Yeah. And it's a great tradition of old guy, young guy hitmen. Like Don Siegel's Killers, or that one with a young Tim Roth, and is it Terrence Stamp? I don't remember the name of the movie. The Hit, maybe? It's like a Stephen Frears or something.
It is a Stephen Frears movie, and I'm also struggling to remember.
They're in Spain, really cool soundtrack, but like I love old guy, young guy, hitman goofiness.
Yeah, and that's one thing I think the movie does such an interesting, good job of, is that it's like partially kind of a B movie that is about just cinema itself. And it's partially like a very human and realistic and principled political drama about an actual period in history. And I feel like some of Kleber Mendonca's earlier movies, especially Bacurau from 2019, kind of had a hard time integrating those two impulses. Kleber Mendonca used to be a critic. He was a critic for a long time before he started making movies. And I feel like that kind of checks out in the sense that you could tell he wants to talk about movies and be into like tropes and ways of making movies, and like he wants to indulge in kind of B-movie corniness and stuff too, but he also has a lot of things he wants to say. And I thought in some of his other movies, Neighboring Sounds too, it didn't really feel integrated. In The Secret Agent, I feel like there's this really kind of communication between the two parts of the film. The stuff about Jaws in the cinema really contributes to this idea of like what we remember about the world, and how the movies we see and the stories that are told are become the things that we use to process the reality around us. I thought the fact that like the first scene is so good, and it's just such like a movie that it's such a scene that would kill in like a B thriller, and it kind of does, and it kind of is, but it becomes something an idea that almost gets dissected, like the idea of like the position that movies and that kind of storytelling has in our lives, and things like the corny stories that they're sharing in the newspapers, the lies about the severed leg and stuff, the way that threads through the actual like really principled human drama, and that the way that they're in communication with each other felt like they synthesized to something more powerful.
Yeah. Would you guys see the horror movie of Hairy Leg?
If it was in like a tight 80 minutes, I'd probably be up for that.
I like how in the climax you have this almost like grindhouse action, but you're pulled right out of that into like immediate time shift right away, and it's like, I don't know, it makes me feel like there's hundreds of stories like this under military dictatorship that you can only get in fragment kind of as this reconciliation process goes. And I thought that was, I don't know, really cool.
Yeah.
I think one of the risks that you run into with like making movies about stories like this is treating all of the surrounding characters as side characters. And I feel like it gives so much weight to everyone surrounding the characters, and the impact of the story, especially like how that's communicated about his like relationship with his son and the result of that. I thought it was really, really great.
Awesome. I'm glad we're all on the same page, more or less. Dope movie. Like it a lot. Well, I think we can leave it at that. Do you guys have any other thoughts about any of this stuff? Oscars, past, present, future.
One more thought on The Secret Agent. I'm excited for a summer of positive representation of fat dudes in open linen shirts.
Nice.
Catch me at the beach.
Sweet. Craig, any final thoughts on any of this?
Just a recommendation. If you want a thriller that is mixed with adventure, take the adventure of going down to the subscribe button just at the bottom of the screen there and just give it a little click and see what happens. You'll be thrilled.
Nice. I will just say before we wrap up quickly, I did just see Surratt a couple days ago because it finally opened here in Montreal. Surratt is up for best foreign picture, and it's awesome. It's a really cool movie. So I recommend that to you guys and everybody listening. That Surratt is really nice.
Yeah, that's on my list.
Oh, you know what? Okay, one more thing quickly before I go. Did you guys just see like which Oscar-nominated movies we just found out are going to enter the Criterion Collection?
No, I did not.
K-pop Demon Hunters.
Yes.
That's the only one I saw.
Oh, you did see? Okay, I wasn't sure if you're joking or not.
No, because I open the email for a couple seconds and then I back out of it.
Yeah. Anyways, I just thought that's funny.
Well, what else is on there? Is there anything else?
Frankenstein is the other one that's also that's also going on, which shouldn't be surprising because I'm pretty sure every Guillermo del Toro movie is on the Criterion Collection now. They love Del Toro. Maybe like Hellboy, The Golden Army, and Blade 2 aren't on yet, but I think that's probably the only ones they're missing.
It's good to give a physical release to because a Netflix thing, right? That's who else is going to do it.
That's kind of the idea, I guess, and that's kind of the most justifiable angle. It's like they have been doing a lot of Netflix movies lately, and it's like you said, who else is going to do it? Netflix is going to release a DVD, so
I could see my copy of The Irishman from here.
Nice. Yeah. Sentimental Value and The Secret Agent as well were earlier released, or were already earlier announced that they're going to be in the Criterion Collection, and it was just an accident. So Sentimental Value had terrible cover art, but Secret Agent, I don't think they've released cover art yet, so hopefully they come up with something cool for that. Anyways, just I thought I had to mention.
Cat.
Oh yeah,
just that. Yeah, just a close up of the free cat. Yeah. All right. Well, it's been a slice, guys. My name's Dylan Ferguson. I'm on Substack. It's just my name, Dylan Ferguson. If you want to read some of my opinions on movies, anything else you guys want to shout out before we wrap things up?
I'm Craig Midwinter. You can just, check out Bravo Outsider if you want to hear our takes on the Real Housewives universe and reality TV.
Do it.
We have a huge back catalog there. We're on a bit of a hiatus. Maybe we return, maybe we don't. Who knows? The only way that you'll find out is if you hit the subscribe button.
Nice. All right. Well, thanks a lot, Sean. Thanks a lot for coming back again.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Always fun.
Cool. All right. Y'all have a good night. We'll see you next time, probably next week on Oscars Outsider.